A very good morning. Thanks for clicking on to the Wednesday edition of Hogan's US Outlook. Hope you're having a good day so far. Hope you enjoyed the Memorial Day weekend as well. Quite stormy in some places, hot in other places, and also cool for some as well, especially in the Central Rockies, where we're seeing some snow over the Colorado high country. Certainly over the next couple of weeks, folks, it looks as if we are going to maintain a fairly cool wet pattern across the central and eastern half of the country. We do have drought conditions across the southeast, particularly so across Florida. I think over the next 10 to 15 days we could see a fair amount of rain, which will certainly help ease that situation there. More heat in the west as well, I think, over the next 10 to 15 days as well, as we do see more in the way of high pressure starting to build. At this time of the year, you would more expect to see that Pacific high strengthening, capping off the atmosphere, settling things down. California goes into kind of summertime mode. Marine layer brings foggy mornings, but of course, during the afternoon, we should see burn off, particularly away from the coastline. It's not usually until you get well into June and July, of course, that you start to see a much more distinct foggy morning, sunny afternoon. June gloom can hang on for quite some time in coastal valleys at this time of the year. But certainly that area of high pressure off the coast, known as the semi-permanent Pacific High, will start to strengthen. We are going to start to talk about heat across the western half of the country. Uh, Certainly the next 7 days, we are going to see some cooler conditions across the Great Lakes in the northeast, and that will maintain itself. That trough kind of tends to kind of retrograde back towards the central and midwestern half of the country. We've got a little bit more in the way of a cool high coming in over the northeastern half of the country. We've still got that ridging positive heights across the west coast here, so we're going to maintain a fairly settled warm pattern here, even as we go off the CFS2 into well, it's actually updating, unfortunately. I can't bring up the week 3 and 4, but we do start to lose the trough somewhat. We start to rebuild the heat and the ridge over the eastern half of the country as we push towards the second half of June. But what's interesting, folks, is that we've cooled the Gulf of Mexico primarily, probably, as Joe Bastardi of Weatherbill has alluded to, the heavy rainfall that we've seen over the central portion of the country in recent weeks, draining into the rivers, primarily the Mississippi. That cooler water rushes into the Gulf, and it actually cools off the Gulf of Mexico. Quite an interesting phenomenon. I find it difficult to say that word, especially if you've had a couple of drinks. But it's interesting how that we've cooled this Gulf off after record-breaking warm water through the winter and the spring thus far. Let's look at the precipitation, because that is closely related to the upper pattern, also the soil moisture content. Plenty of moisture in the ground, and the atmosphere is going to feed back to bring another wet next couple of weeks here. So we're going to maintain a fairly wet pattern, I think, overall. Certainly good news for the southeastern half of the country. Not so good for the for areas such as Mississippi, up into Arkansas and Missouri, even southern parts of Illinois, where we've had a lot of rain in recent weeks. Drier than normal pattern across the northern plain states. That kind of shrinks as we go into week 2, if you notice that, but still slightly average to below average to rainfall. No surprise that we've got a dry west coast week 1 and week 2, given the fact that we've got a positive heights up and down the west coast here. But overall, 2-meter temperature anomalies. Week 1 indicates plenty of cool over the eastern half of the country. You can see here this is week 1, and a fairly decent trough in place here. So cool for the Great Lakes, Midwest, Northeast. Slightly warmer than normal across the Carolinas and down into Florida as well. We've seen astonishing heat recently. 98 degrees, all-time record for Miami, and only a couple of degrees off the all-time record, not just for the month of May, but for any month of the year. Warmer than normal across the western half of the country, no surprise there. And in the week 2, Slightly warmer across the Great Lakes in the northeast. And the reason why is we've got that trough kind of retrogrades back towards the west. Cooler, wetter than normal conditions, I think, stretching from the Central Plains to the southeast, including Florida, which is good news because we've got fires burning there, we've got drought conditions there. I think we could start to see the conditions easing over the next couple of weeks as we start to increase the rainfall over the peninsula. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Do check out the written post available later on, and I'll be back in the next few days, hopefully. Bye for now.